He hammered away with his mythical hammer Mjolnir, forging powerful relics with ease. This powerful blacksmith is known as Vil, the most important man in the whole kingdom. However, this title was unknown to one person, his wife, who wanted to call off their engagement. Our protagonist, Vil, was confused because both their parents had personally arranged their marriage, giving him the responsibility to continue his father's blacksmithing and her father's trading legacy. She explains to Vil that she had already found someone else. Instead of introducing her new spouse like a sane person, she began to belittle Vil by allowing her new spouse to caress her in front of the man who carried their business. The man who destroyed Vil's marriage was none other than his brother, Sechin. Sechin explains to Vil that when Sirical's father passed, he was the one who was there to help her grieve, while he chose work over his wife. Sirical further emphasizes Sechin's statement by explaining that he was the one who comforted and supported her, unlike him. Vil shouts, eagerly explaining that he didn't have a choice, as he was working his ass off to rebuild her father's trading company, which was about to go bankrupt. Sechin believed Vil was lying, as the real reason the business was still intact was due to a major client appearing at the right moment and completely shifting the course of their business, basically saying Vil had no hands in the growth of the Hassan Trading Company. Vil was shocked that they could diminish all his effort to a mere chance. His ex-wife Sirical explains that it was not what they meant. This gave Vil hope that she had finally seen his efforts in the business growth. But he was greatly mistaken, as she was more stupid than she gave off. She explains that her determination was what people recognized, which gravitated customers towards her father's dying business. Vil began to tremble. They had just finished building their new home and opening a new store, but she chose to throw it all away. Sechin also wanted Vil to move out of the house, as he couldn't live under the same roof as his wife's ex-husband. Vil shouts, telling his ex-wife and his brother that they should go stay at Sechin's house instead, as the Hassan company belonged to Sirical and not him. Sechin explains that since he was the new head of the household, the house was rightfully his, and his pride could not allow anything less. Vil was confused about his remark about being the head of the household, which gave Sechin no other choice but to explain how his new position came about. It was all due to Sirical carrying their child, which meant he was now the new head of the Hassan company. Vil dashed towards him with rage. Sechin smirks, telling Vil to calm down, as he might scare his wife. Vil walked away defeated and betrayed, but he was stopped by Sirical. She dared to tell Vil to remain in the store and continue to make weapons as she still needed them for her father's company. Sechin tells his wife not to worry, as he will be taking care of the blacksmith from now on. And just like that, Vil walked out of the house and company he worked so hard to build, never looking back. Sechin began to think about the times he begged his father to let him take over the store, as he was tired of his father's favoring Vil. His father tells him that Vil is a once-in-a-millennium genius, blessed with golden hands, while he and him was the same, mediocre. Though harsh, it was the truth, and Sechin hated his father for it. As if Vil inheriting the god's blessing wasn't enough, he also left a beautiful fiancée for him, which led Sechin on an envious path as he took everything Vil held dear. A knock echoed outside, and the door opened. A beautiful female holding a banquet walked inside, seeking Vil's presence. She is the princess, Enro. She came to congratulate Vil after hearing he had opened a new store. Sechin wonders what a princess would want with his brother. The princess turned to Sechin's wife and told her she was a lucky person to be married to such an amazing man, a sentence that confused her. Sechin tells the princess that Vil and Sirical's engagement had been called off, and Vil had already left the store, making him the new owner of the Hapusai store. The princess smiles with delight. He further tells the princess that he will be taking responsibility for Vil's new store and everything that comes with it. She breaks out laughing at his comment. She was skeptical that he could handle Vil's work with arms like those. She leaves after realizing the person she wanted to see was not there. Outside, she tells her line of guards to cancel every deal with Hassan Trading Company and to find Vil immediately. The guard didn't understand why they were canceling their deal with Hapusai, since Vil's brother was the one taking over, as he didn't see an issue with that. The princess turned to her guard, as what he did not understand was the vast difference between the brothers' capabilities. Vil was far away venting his frustration. He felt so betrayed that even if they crawled back to him apologizing, he would never return. He activated his golden hands, connecting to the divine hammer Mjolnir, the hammer that was passed down to him by his grandfather. Vil thinks about the moment his grandfather Gankoji explained his power to him. He explained that Hapusai was the embodiment of him, a blacksmith blessed with the golden hands. Every previous Hapusai carried these golden hands, each using unique, powerful skills. We return to the present for a brief moment. Vil activates his skill Ultra Alchemy, turning a small rock into gold. He could use this power to pay for his travel, but he's afraid he might flood the market and cause a financial crash. This was one of the many skills Vil possessed. Unlike other previous Hapusai who possessed one skill, Vil possessed 5 different crafting skills. He was the only one in history to have such a talent. Before dying, his grandfather passed on the hammer Mjolnir, a divine relic he created. With this hammer, Vil had officially become a Hapusai. Vil inherited the shop name and the divine artifact Mjolnir, which he used to maintain city barriers, the hero's holy sword, and sacred relics. These were all tasks branded to him by the king. We return to the princess explaining to his clueless knights that the reason they still had peace was because of the Hapusai. And if Vil remains missing for too long, the barrier will deteriorate. The knight seeks permission to inform the holy sword wielder of Vil's absence. The princess wasn't fond of the idea of declaring it to the hero yet. She sent the knights to find Vil quickly, as the hero Caroline, who wields the holy sword, not only trusted Vil as a craftsman, but as a man, and since Vil was single, meant Caroline would try to snatch him away from her, something she could not let happen. We return to Vil using a unique feature of his golden hands to store his traveling money. Vil was betrayed by the people he trusted, but he wasn't truly upset with his store being handed to his brother, as the maintenance was something his father started so that he could put food on their table. But that wasn't the true purpose of a Hapusai. The Mjolnir hammer was a path and a blueprint to Vil's true purpose. It was a reference for Vil's true goal of a Hapusai, which was to forge original sacred relics and offer them to the heavens. That was the last statement of Vil's grandfather before he passed. Vil tossed a stone in the sky and slammed his hammer on the stone, turning it into an SSS teleportation crystal. He was no longer confined by the Hassan Company, and now he will travel the world and sharpen his skills and one day create a sacred weapon. A voice cries out far away asking for help. It was a child running from a giant bear. Vil instantly defeated the giant bear, saving the girl. The beast girl was badly injured, with a chunk of her leg missing. Vil turned his attention towards the child, asking if she was okay. His eyes caught something strange around her neck. It was a slave collar. The poor child was a merchandise from a slave company. Vil realized that the slave merchant who was transporting her had been eaten by the giant bear. Luckily, she wasn't eaten, but she was badly injured by the bear. She began to scream after realizing her leg was missing. As the adrenaline was no longer needed, she began to feel every ounce of pain. Vil approached with his hammer in his hand, and he assured the child that he would not hurt her. He activated his skill, Full Restoration, and gently placed his hammer on her leg. A momentary pain struck her as her leg began to restore itself. The pain vanished, and her leg was intact. She had never seen such a power before. He explains to her that he used his power for full restoration to repair her damaged leg. He swung his hammer once more, breaking the chains around her neck that confined her life. If she had tried to forcefully remove her collar from her neck, the collar would have exploded, taking her neck with it. She ran to hug Vil to thank him for his help, while also introducing herself as Poro. After being acquainted, Vil approached a tree as it was time to set up camp. He slammed the tree with his hammer, causing the organic tree to transmute into a cabin. Before continuing, let's take a small detour. Far away in the distance, we see a horde of dead dragons stacked on top of each other. The culprit is the hero of the Holy Light Sword, Lady Caroline Iceberg. She began to stare deeply at her chipped sword, with a cool and composed expression that infatuated the knights. She smiled happily after seeing the condition of her sword. Caroline teleports to the kingdom's royal capital. Her sword spirit Cory, which resembled a cat, began to tease her, as it knew why she was in such a good mood. She was happy as she finally had a reason to visit her beloved blacksmith. Though her sword was teasing her, it was also happy since Vil was the only one who handled its body with so much care. But her owner's approach enraged it. As Caroline fought 100 dragons, just so her sword could be chipped. They arrived at the door, but before entering she made sure that she looked the part before walking in. They were greeted by Vil's brother instead, which completely changed their facial expression from happy to annoyed. She asks to see Vil, and Sechin explains that he was not here. She walked in as she was willing to wait. What she did not expect was for Sechin to tell her that Vil was fired. This angered her, as the only reason she was here was for Vil. The hero Caroline already knew Vil was fired, but she didn't know the circumstances that led to it. She points her sword at Sechin while asking about Vil's whereabouts, as she needed to repair her sword. Clueless, he thought she was angry because her sword could not be repaired, and so offered to repair her sword instead. Though doubtful, they decided to give him a chance to see if he was capable enough. Sechin was so confident that he believed that after Caroline saw his work, she would never stop coming back to their store. He didn't understand why everyone was so obsessed with his brother, as the only thing he felt that was special about him was the fact that he was the firstborn. This would be the final nail in the coffin of his plans to take everything away from his brother. He began to harshly scrape the sword back and forth on the whetstone, hurting the spirit of the sword in the process. But he couldn't see or hear the screams of the sword as he didn't have the affinity and skills to see the spirit. The sword has had enough of Sechin's recklessness and fought back, sending him flying. Caroline recalls her sword. She explains to Sechin that her sword was angry at his poor craftsmanship. With his small-minded personality, he refused to believe that inanimate objects could have emotions. After comparing their skills, she realized that Sechin was nowhere close to Vil's talent. The gap was so big that she described it as being worlds apart. Cyril appeared, seeing her husband eagerly shout to a customer to come back, but she did not know that the person passing by was the hero Caroline. Sechin kneeled on the floor and began to explain to his wife that he had made the ice hero mad and that she would never return to their store. In his eyes, one less hero wasn't going to cause irreversible damage to their business, as they had countless other customers they could depend on. But Cyril finally used her brain and shouted at her husband, telling him that if the hero hated him, the whole kingdom would rally behind her and hate him also. Like a toddler throwing a tantrum, he shouted back at Cyril, telling her not to yell at him. But such a matter was not going to be fixed by shouting at each other, as they needed to start working on the orders from the royal family. A worker walked in telling the two that the royal family had canceled their contract. The two looked at the worker, perplexed by what he just said. We jump back to Vil and his new friend. She enjoys the bath, the clothes, the food that is prepared for her, and the fluffy bed she sleeps on. To her, Vil was like a wizard who could do anything. Not wanting to be mixed up with a wizard, Vil explains that he created the necessities she enjoys by using his ultra-forging skill and materials he took out of his storage box. Regardless of what he is, she remained amazed by his skills. This was the first time he had ever received genuine praise from someone. Back when he was with his ex-wife, his efforts weren't worthy of praise because to her, Vil was just doing what he was meant to do, which wasn't worthy of recognition. Poro felt the description that he gave Vil wasn't close enough to what he truly was. As to her, he was something more like a divine being in her eyes. To Vil, he was far from divine. Throughout his time with his father and his grandfather, he realized both were opposites of each other, as his grandfather Gankoji was a genius while his father wasn't. One kept inventing incredible magic tools his whole life, while the other was careful and hardworking, crafting items for others instead of himself. Vil knew what it meant to have talent and to not to have it, as both his grandpa and father played a key role in shaping the man he is today. In his eyes, he was no god, just a regular blacksmith, and with the talent he possesses like his grandfather, all Vil wanted was to make people smile with the things he creates, putting others before himself, like the mindset of his father. He became embarrassed after realizing he was speaking to himself as Poro had fallen asleep. The sun rose, signaling the rise of a new day. Vil woke up, but something was strange. Poro was missing and a woman was in his bed sleeping. The woman woke up and greeted Vil with a good morning. Her tone and appearance had made him realize that it was Poro who had suddenly grown into an adult. Poro explains that she underwent an existential evolution, transforming her body into what we see now. While outside, she runs around in her new outfit created by Vil. He was still curious about this existential evolution she spoke about. Poro began to explain that when a monster absorbs a lot of mana, they undergo an evolution into a higher tier of their species, and since beast folk had monster DNA, meant they also shared the same trait. Her evolution was caused by eating Vil's food, which had a lot of mana in it. After getting his explanation, there was a more important matter Vil wanted to discuss with Poro, which was whether she was going to continue to follow him on his journey. Poro asks Vil if he despises her for following him. Vil quickly dismisses that thought from her mind. As he didn't hate her, he was just asking. She was glad to hear that, as she didn't have a home to go to. They continue their journey together. While walking, they stepped into a massive pool of water. They were heading to the dead-end village up ahead. Once they reached it, all they saw was a massive lake and no village. Luckily for them, there were people around whom they could ask questions. The village chief approached, introducing himself as Arthur. The rest of the villagers appeared one after another and explained to Poro and Vil that their village was flooded due to heavy rain, and there were no young people around to help. After hearing their situation, Vil walked on top of a massive rock to get a better view of the surrounding area. He realized the village was surrounded by mountains, creating a basin in the middle, which was why the water came and flooded their village as it couldn't find a path to flow to. He took out his hammer and extended it in length and size, and the hammer came crashing down from the heavens. He slammed the hammer down on the ground, creating a giant hole. He then began to create a gateway where the water could travel by breaking the walls of the hole which drained the water. The flood issue was resolved, but there was another issue that needed to be fixed. Vil went to the village area, and as expected, the village was destroyed as wooden walls were prone to such casualties when faced with any massive water. To fix this, Vil took out his storage and summoned small common ores which he used with his alchemy skill. Full restoration, turning the wooden village walls from wood to strong, sturdy brick houses, restoring the dead-end village to an even greater village. The villagers ran to their new houses. They couldn't believe what their eyes had just seen. They began to bow to their savior for saving their village as they could now live peacefully in their new village. They were so grateful that they couldn't allow Vil to leave without repaying him. Vil wasn't interested in repayment, but since they offered, he decided to ask if the villagers had any unusual weapons or tools they could pass on. They brought in a cursed sword in the room and began to explain its backstory. Long ago, a hero wielding this exact sword defeated an evil god and saved the dead-end village, but something started to corrode his mind, driving the hero crazy. Vil tore the seal of the sword. He then tells Poro to go outside with the old man, but she refuses since she won't be able to protect him if she does. With no other choice, Vil began to start his work. He activated his destruction of all things level 1 decomposition and hammered the sword with his hammer, breaking the chains around the sword. After getting a closer look at the sword, he realized the sword needed maintenance as the quality had deteriorated. He felt sorry for the weapon as he believed it suffered immense neglect. A dark aura began to emit from the sword and tried to corrupt his mind. The spirit of the sword manifested and tried to further take over Vil's mind. The old man couldn't believe that Vil could see the spirit of the sword, as only a few could see the spirit that is trapped in this demonic sword. Vil had figured it out. The demonic sword wasn't trying to corrupt its wielders. Instead, it was the curse that was cast upon it that corrupted those who tried to wield it, as it was a curse that manifests whenever an unworthy possessor tries to use it. And due to this unknowing factor, people began to spread the story of a sword that corrupts its user, which resulted in the sword being shunned and sealed away, forced to endure immense pain. The sword began to speak. It didn't want to hurt anyone, it was just scared, and all it wanted was to be at peace. Vil smiled, promising he won't leave it behind. He swung his hammer, activating his golden hands. Vil declared his profession out loud as a blacksmith, and fixing tools was his job. He branded the sword with the name Asura and slammed his hammer on the sword, creating a massive beam of light that extended to the skies. With his super forging skill, Vil created another holy sword, dispelling any curse the sword had attached to it. On her journey to find Vil, Caroline's spirit felt the surge of energy from Vil's hammer as another one of its kind was born. A female spirit appeared and greeted her creator. She then began to thank Vil for engraving the sword he wields with the name Asura, which she now bears. Thanks to Vil, she has now been reborn from a cursed sword to a holy sword, making Vil the first creator of a holy weapon. Poro was amazed by the beauty of the spirit. The sword spirit was surprised to see another person in the room capable of seeing her. Vil tossed the sword to Poro, and instantly, something lit up inside her. She began to perform moves she had never learned before, which shocked her. This was all Vil's doing as he made a unique adjustment by allowing the wielder to understand how to handle the sword the moment they touch it. He was inspired by Poro to make these adjustments due to her explanation of existential evolution, which he used to evolve the sword's existence. This was something that had never been done before. The old man congratulated Vil for being the first human to create a holy sword. This made Vil start to think about the past, as neither could his grandfather. As each time he tried, he became frustrated with his failure. While they celebrated his accomplishment, Vil wasn't happy. He felt he was finishing an unfinished product someone else had started, as it was not the same as creating it from scratch. But he was happy he was able to create a new life for Yuzora. He one day hopes to create a holy sword he can be proud of. We return to Caroline and her cat Corey, frightened by the fact that a human was out there who could create a holy weapon. Caroline began to smile. She instantly knew who was behind it all, but her happiness turned into worry. She needed to get to Vil's location immediately. Vil was on a carriage heading to Madoka's empire. The spirit Yuzora thanked Vil once again for giving her a new life. She also promised to use her new life to teach Poro how to properly use a sword. The wind began to blow violently, startling the horse and Vil. A green dragon landed before them, shaking the ground beneath it. It took to the sky as it prepared to attack. Yuzora couldn't pass on such an opportunity to teach Poro the ways of the sword. The two lunged towards one another, but Poro wasn't confident in herself. She slashed the dragon beneath the neck, leaving a shallow cut. The dragon prepares to retaliate, but before it could, Yuzora imparted words of encouragement to Poro. She explains to her unconfident wielder that if she kept her feelings sheathed, the light inside her heart would fade away. The real message behind her words was to show Poro that a brighter light could shine in the shadowy depths of despair. Poro sees the light to victory, and she charges in once again, cutting down the green dragon with a swift slash. She celebrated her achievement, but Yuzora wasn't happy with her performance as she struggled to finish the dragon with a single blow. Poro accepts her words without denial. She knows she lacks the skills to be considered a swordswoman. She continues further and admits that without Yuzora, she was nothing but an amateur. Vil assured her that she did well for her first time handling a holy sword. We return to Caroline, dreading the foreseeable future. The reason why she was so scared was due to the immense power a holy sword brings, which could cause a massive shift in the balance of power. If the kingdom found out about Vil's existence, there would be a war over his ability. Though dangerous, that wasn't what she was most worried about. She plans to propose to Vil, as not only would the kingdom yearn for his power, but his fame would spread wide, causing all the women in the world to propose to him, something she was scared of. Her cat tells her that the holy sword energy was in the dead-end village close to the empire border. Caroline suddenly stops as she is too late. She wasn't the only hero in the kingdom capable of sensing Vil's energy. A massive thunderbolt suddenly struck from the sky, and a woman appeared from the smoke, saying she had found her sensei. The woman charges at Poro, refusing to acknowledge her strength to protect her master. Her attack was deflected by Poro. She countered with a barrage of strikes with her holy sword of lightning, Thunderthorn. The female before us was one of the 6 holy sword wielders in total in the world, all being beautiful battle maidens. After sensing Lakia, the wielder of the holy sword Thunderthorn at Vil's location, Caroline increased her pace, because she knew Lakia would try to take Vil away from her. We continue the battle with Poro foot getting caught by the whip of Lakia. She tried to cut the vine but failed. Lakia taunts her for failing to cut her whip. She was also done playing around. She released Poro and struck the ground with her whip, creating a massive lightning aimed towards Poro. The attack was deflected by Vil's almighty refinement shield, sending the bolt of lightning crashing far away. He caught Poro and apologized to her for getting her caught up in such trouble. Lakia became enraged after misunderstanding the relationship between Poro and Vil. She believed she was Vil's wife, and she couldn't allow such a weak woman to be with her master. She asks Vil if he remembers their deal, which was that if she defeats him, he would accept her as his wife. Vil thought she was joking, but she was serious, and to prove her strength to him, she called upon her strongest attack. The weather began to change. It became obvious that Poro was completely outclassed when fighting her. as Lakia was only showing a fraction of her true strength. She sends her ultimate attack, Dragonic Thunderstorm, and a massive lightning dragon emerges from the skies, crashing down upon Vil and Poro. The attack was so immense that if it lands, everything around the vicinity would be turned to ashes. Vil activated his hammer and used his skill Almighty Destruction at max level and annihilated the dragon. Lakia was defeated, but she wasn't surprised as she always knew Vil was a man with great strength. Vil introduces Lakia, one of the many heroes of the Empire and possessor of the evil eye, an eye with immense power capable of killing anyone with a single glance. When Lakia was a child, she fell victim to a disaster, as she was cursed with the eye of the god of death. Anyone unfortunate enough to look into her eyes would die, an eye that plagued the world of lives. Many tried to help, but failed miserably, and with no other choice they decided to sentence her to death. But her death was postponed due to her being the bearer of a holy sword. So the Empire called upon Vil, but he couldn't remove her curse as it was beyond his capabilities at that moment. So he did the next best thing and sealed it away. Lakia was tired of being trapped inside a dungeon, which was why she was here before the man who brought her salvation. Feeling the immense holy energy, she rushed here, as only one man came to mind who was capable of creating a holy sword. Vil approached Lakia and told her to take off her eye patch, which acted as a seal for her eye, but she was reluctant. Vil needed her to trust him, and so she complied, taking off her seal and revealing her eye to him. Vil could see all the flaws in the curse and took advantage of it, destroying the eye that plagued the world and ruined her life. But not necessarily. Rather than destroying it, Vil reconstructed it into a divine relic. After seeing what he could do with Yuzora before turning her into a holy sword, Vil tried the same principles, turning Lakia's cursed eye into something divine. For a better understanding, Vil explains to Lakia that her eye has been reborn just like Yuzora. She charges to her master, both stumbling on the floor. She begins to cry, thanking Vil for breaking the curse that chained her for years. Vil was proud of her growth as he acknowledged her strength. Hearing this, Lakia took advantage of the moment to propose to Vil, but he declined. We return to the worst brother alive, Sechin, holding a curse seal that had the power to create fake tools at will. He thanks the man who gave him the tool, and the hooded man smirks, telling him to use the curse seal well. The story doesn't remain on Sechin. We return to Vil, who is being chased by Lakia, who wants to use her powers to seduce him, but fails. She questions Vil about why her powers did not work when used on him. Vil explains that he purposely made himself immune to her charm. The group carried on their journey with a new member, heading towards the Carter imperial capital. The barrier covering the kingdom was breathtaking. Vil questioned himself as to why he could suddenly see the barrier. This was a normal inquiry, as this phenomenon wasn't possible with the naked eye. Yuzora explains that the reason her creator was able to see the barrier was due to his skills improving. They arrive at the imperial castle, where they will meet Her Majesty. They've reached the main hall of the palace and met with the Imperial Majesty Artemis. Poro questions if the Imperial Majesty was the lady before them. Lakia began to explain to the clueless Poro that the people of this empire favor the powerful rather than one's gender. In her prime, Lady Artemis proved pivotal to the survival of the kingdom as she led her own army to protect the country they now call the Carter capital. She greets Vil, as the span of time since they last talked to each other has been too long. He agrees, as she was the one who personally invited Vil to the palace to cure Lakia's curse. Artemis tried to thank Vil once again for coming to Lakia's aid, but she couldn't thank him properly, as she began to cough violently. Her lungs were badly damaged due to age and vigorous battles, so badly that even the top medical technology could not cure her of her illness. She acknowledged the deterioration of her health, knowing her time was near. Artemis was only happy she was able to thank Vil before she died. Before dying, Vil had one final request he wanted her to grant him, which was to let him heal her broken body. The queen was frightened by his request. She wasn't sure Vil could pull such a miracle, as doctors told her not even the saints could fix her condition. Vil admits curing her illness was beyond his capabilities, but her broken body and wounds and flaws were something he was confident he could fix. With some words of advice from Lakia, the queen agrees to Vil's request. Vil activates his golden hands and uses his full restoration on Artemis, and she begins to glow. A worker by the name General Adrak of the Imperial Majesty walked in as there was an emergency that needed her attention. Seeing His Majesty surrounded by a strange light, he draws his blade preparing to slay Vil and his friends. Lakia explains to the general that Her Majesty is undergoing treatment at the moment. Hearing this, he apologizes for his sudden outburst and explains that the barrier was broken and demonic insects were heading towards the imperial capital. They quickly rushed outside to see a horde of demonic insects heading towards them. The guards quickly carried the people of the capital to safety before acting. Lakia shouts to the general telling him to evacuate the citizens, but he had other plans. He wanted to fight head-on against the insect. In his eyes, this was the best choice as the barrier was broken and they would be overrun eventually. Vil volunteers to fix the broken barrier, and he begins to approach the barrier while the general tries to stop him. He activates his golden hands and looks at the barrier. He feels something familiar. He realized that the barrier shares the same magic circle that was on Lakia's eye, but that was a matter that would be discussed later as he jumped towards the horde of insects and activated his almighty refinement, killing every insect with one blow. Everyone watched, surprised by the power of Vil's. Vil had also upgraded the barrier to be self-sufficient and to eradicate any monster that it came in contact with. He also disclosed something strange as the barrier was tampered with from the inside, as if someone had purposely destroyed the barrier. The general started to sweat profusely and told Vil that he was lying as no one could see the barrier. Vil counters by telling the general that it wasn't out of the realm of possibilities that someone could see the barrier in the condition it was in. Vil looks at him and began to ask why he was sweating so badly. As if he was scared, he suspected him as the culprit behind this scheme. A voice spoke inside the palace calling the situation shameful, and a beautiful woman walked out wearing the clothes of the Imperial Majesty. The crown was evident, which meant they were looking at Her Imperial Majesty. Lakia and others became astonished, and the people she ruled over needed an explanation for why she looked so young. Artemis explains that Vil repaired her body and her new appearance was one of the perks she has gotten. Her cells weren't healed but completely replaced with new ones, which caused her appearance to change. Without hesitation, she tells her guards to arrest the general. Knowing it was futile to explain, he opens his vest revealing bombs that were strapped to him. Before detonating, he screams at the top of his lungs, 7 powers, and glory to them. Artemis dashed into action with her new vigorous body and kicked the general into the sky, and he exploded into the air. The people celebrates their queen's revitalization. More importantly, the queen wanted to repay Vil for not only healing her, but also giving her a new chance at life. But Vil needed no repayment, as seeing her smile was enough. She blushes and accepts her new life. But Lakia and Poro are dreading the foreseeable future as they now have a new contender for Vil's heart. Unlike those two, Vil was curious about the name the general shouted. Let's take a quick detour and see how our new couples are doing. The store was a complete mess with scattered envelopes of nobles and other important figures dissociating themselves from their store. A knock echoed outside the store, but due to Sirical's current circumstance, she became rash, shouting to whoever was behind those doors. The person enters regardless and apologizes for her intrusion. She is the S-rank master of the Adventurers Guild. Knowing this, Sirical apologizes for her rash remark. Her business at the store was to purchase another one of the swords she was in love with, a sword that Vil had created, but the guild master was unaware of this aspect. She was so in love with the quality of the sword that she wanted to buy 50 of them for the guild. Sirical brings over a chest filled with swords. Those were the swords she and her husband poured their heart into making. The guild master found them beautiful, but something seemed off about the swords. She tossed one into the sky and sliced it with the sword made by Vil, cutting the sword into 2. She was deceived by Sirical as the sword's true quality was masked by an ominous aura, giving the illusion that they were A-rank weapons. This wasn't Sirical's doing, but the guild master did not know that, nor did she care, as she was deceived, and most importantly, she placed her subordinates at risk in battle, and for that reason, she will be filing a lawsuit against her. Sirical begged for mercy as her father's business was at risk of collapsing if she pursued a lawsuit. She begs and begs, pleading to the guild master and promising that such an incident would never happen again. All she felt was pity for her father's business, as this was the final nail in the coffin for the Hassan company. She walked away, awaiting Sirical's appearance in court. Sirical barges into Sechin workplace. She wanted an explanation for the swords he's been making. Before he could explain, she interrupted and began to berate him with insults. As due to his stupidity, their business is now on the verge of being sued. Sechin proves to Sirical why he was the more stupid one in the relationship by downplaying the seriousness of the situation, explaining that they will be making a lot of money with his method as he believed people value quantity over quality. Sirical was more enraged, screaming at the top of her lungs, telling Sechin to get his head out of his ass, as that did not matter if they were sued. She was utterly disappointed and disgusted at Sechin. To her, he was basically insulting the work of every blacksmith by disregarding the quality of his weapons as long as they were sold. She explains to Sechin why his plan would fail in the long run, as cutting corners would cause their customers to abandon them. Sirical, who wasn't a blacksmith, couldn't believe she had to explain such an important rule to her blacksmith husband. She yells once more, asking Sechin to create an A-rank weapon and prove why he was better than Vil, but he couldn't. With tears pouring from her eyes, Sirical blames Sechin for their failing business. She also acknowledged that she was wrong to leave Vil, as she now sees that he was the one keeping their business together. Sechin became enraged after hearing Vil's name, and held up the curse item he got from the hooded man, explaining to his wife that with the item he held, he could turn garbage into relics. Sirical gave up. She was exhausted from his stupidity. She began to think back to Vil once more and headed out to go search for him. Sechin grabs her arm, telling her to wait, but she retaliates and slaps him across the face. All interest she had in Sechin was gone, and she left to go find Vil. An ominous aura began to take over him as he repeated the name of his brother. He was too blinded to acknowledge his own mistakes and continued to blame Vil for his wrongdoings. This was all a part of the hooded man's plan, as the item Sechin received from him began to corrupt his mind. We continue our journey with Vil and Poro. Vil had received a map to Crowley, a small estate he would be ruling over. This was possible due to the Empress ignoring his pleas, as she had to reward Vil with something, since he was the one who saved the Empire. They arrived at a village on the land Vil will be ruling over, which was quieter than they expected. Suddenly, footsteps and screams were heard. A girl was being chased by a lizard man. She was inches away from being eaten. Luckily, Vil interfered and caged the monster before it could attack. Poro drew her sword and dived in to slay the lizard. Unexpectedly, she was stopped by the girl they saved, screaming not to kill her grandpa. Both were confused, but before asking for more information, Poro introduced their new lord, who would be ruling over them. Out of nowhere, a crowd gathered and began to beg their lord for his help in saving the village. They all gathered inside a house and began to explain the situation. The girl who was almost killed introduced herself as Noah, and her grandpa Lazaro, who was once the village chief of the village. She then reveals her back to Vil, which was covered in scales. They were cursed by the white dragon god. She explains to Vil that since ancient times, the white dragon god tormented the world with violent winds, and those who got caught in the winds suffered a curse that turned them into lizard men over time. Vil heard the word curse and stood up, hammer in hand, and approached the girl's grandpa inside the cage. He activates his golden hands and slams his hammer onto the head of her grandpa, breaking the curse and reverting him to normal. The girl and her grandpa reunited, and one after another Vil cured every person in the village of their curse. After finishing, Vil waved goodbye to the village people. The girl ran outside the house and asked where they were going. Vil and Poro were heading towards the White Dragon in the mountains. Vil and Poro arrived at the White Dragon Mountain and entered an open entrance. After walking down the stairs, they arrived in an open area where the air was dense with miasma. Melted dead bodies decorated the space, but thanks to Vil's barrier, he and Poro avoided the fate of these lost souls. The space was cursed, but Vil did not know exactly where the curse was located. Poro stepped on a stone to get a better view, and she was suddenly tossed off violently as the dragon emerged from the darkness. It immediately readies to attack, its neck swollen with fire as it breathes flames at Poro. Vil quickly interferes and blocks the attack using his new upgraded barrier, which was stronger than the barrier in the imperial capital. The white dragon opens its jaws wide and chomps on the barrier, but its face sinks within it. The barrier was so flexible that it was able to absorb physical impact. The dragon bounces back after the force of its attack was turned against it, sending it flying. It landed on the ground, breaking the floor under it, and sending itself and Vil deeper inside its lair. Vil and Poro landed safely thanks to his barrier, unlike the dragon whose wings were badly damaged to save its fall. Vil realized that the dragon was cursed. He approaches the weak dragon and gets closer. The closer he gets, the more agitated the dragon becomes. The dragon was shaking as it wasn't angry, but in pain from the curse cast upon it. Vil approached once more, calmer than before, and appealed to the dragon to grant him the request to heal its cursed body, but he needed its trust to do so. The dragon laid down its head, and with a swing of its hammer, he activates almighty refinement, curing the dragon of its curse. The dragon spoke after seeing its scales return to their true color. Vil did not know dragons could speak, but thanks to being a dragon god, it was capable of speech, allowing it to use the tongue of the humans. It thanks Vil for returning it to its original state. He also introduced himself to the dragon as Vil, a traveling blacksmith. But Poro had other plans as she interfered and introduced Vil the rightful way as the Lord of Crowley. The dragons shared a special interest with Vil's new name as it too shared the name Crowley, a name that was bestowed upon it by the king of old. The land in which Vil and the dragon fought was the previous king's domain, but now it was just a cursed remnant. Vil inquired about the reason the dragon was imbued with such a malicious curse. The dragon explains that before the destruction of the Crowley land, it lived peacefully until the king died, and it was driven into a state of grief. In its weakened moment, a mysterious figure took advantage of its condition and cast a curse upon it. Poro explains to the dragon that its corrupted body contaminated the air in the mountains, and the winds spread its curse upon the village below, infecting the villagers. It felt guilty after hearing the suffering it had caused to innocent people, but Vil assured the dragon that it was not its fault as he pointed to the ground, revealing a cursed magic circle. But not all could see the circle since it also had an illusionary technique. Vil explains the danger of the cursed circle as it intrudes on a person's mind during their weakest moment, corrupting their head with malicious thoughts, causing unbridled rage, and prohibiting the victim from leaving the area. He finished off his explanation by telling the dragon that the one who cursed it was most likely the Seven Powers. It smashed the ground covered with the circle with rage in its eyes as it promised to kill the Seven Powers. But the circle was still intact. Only Vil, who held the golden hands, could rid the curse as he smashed the ground, destroying the circle and rebuilding the king's castle. The dragon suddenly turned into a woman. She explains to the confused duo that those who descend from the heavens lose a lot of their strength, but within this sanctuary Vil created, she could use 100% of her power, allowing her to polymorph into the form she is now. But she needed to remain in the castle to keep her form active. The castle has now become a celestial domain for her. She abruptly got up from her chair and grabbed Vil's hands after seeing the mark of the sun. She started to explain in detail about the mark of the sun, as it is a rare sigil that grants the power of the golden hands, something we already knew. But what was new to us was that this was proof of the one who grasps the sun. Not only that, but these sigils had been around since the creation of the world, with only a few bestowed with it. She then brings Vil to a room with the same mark, a room that was favored by the previous king. Vil got closer to touch the circle, and a bright light shines from his hands and from the circle on the floor. Both were resonating with one another as he prepared to be pulled inside the circle. He was transported to a separate space, where clouds covered the skies and tall buildings that could be seen from a mile away. The white dragon Crowley used telepathy to ask Vil if he was okay. This was the only way she could get in touch with him, as they were in two different spaces. Vil began to walk, looking around the unknown city. He suddenly hit his head on an invisible wall, and that's when he noticed the missing sun. The sky was an illusion, but what intrigued him the most was the relation the space had with the Hapasai. He suddenly remembers something his grandfather, Gankoji, mentioned about their workshop being able to block certain entities from entering, similar to the circle that stopped Crowley from entering. Vil saw a circle attached to the wall he hit his head on, and he approached it, and a gate appeared leading to another unknown space. Lady Crowley began to scream as the gate was a passage to an ultra-rare, impossible dungeon known as the Fall, and also one of the Seven Hells. With her vast knowledge, she began to explain to Vil the history of these dungeons, as these dungeons were ancient and hidden throughout the world, but none had been discovered until now. as she couldn't smell any traces of magical power, as humans usually leave magical residue when accessing a dungeon. He entered the gate and went deeper inside. Vil found ores attached to the walls of the dungeon. Sadly, Crowley explains to Vil that the dungeon walls were indestructible and he couldn't mine them. Vil took out his trusty hammer and activated his level 1 Almighty Destruction and smashed the indestructible walls. Seeing this, Crowley refuses to believe he was a blacksmith. Vil was confused, and she explained to him that his skill, Almighty Destruction, was a skill capable of erasing everything with one hit. Even after hearing that, Vil continued his mining and used another one of his abilities to summon a storage box which he used to store the ores inside, and almost gave Lady Crowley a heart attack after seeing him use another one of his weird skills. Vil explains to her that it was not a skill, but rather an extension of Golden Hands, one of the many features he possessed. Lady Crowley knew the capability of the Golden Hands, so it confused her when she heard that Vil possessed more than one feature. Vil began to name all the skills his Golden Hand possessed, which was Almighty Refinement, Destruction, Full Restoration, and Enchantment. As for the last skill, he wasn't fond of it, so he barely used it. After that long explanation, Vil continued his mining. To make sure he didn't leave the dungeon without clearing every crevice, he took out a map from his storage which he then used Almighty Refinement on, which mapped every layer and route of the dungeon. She screams after seeing how easily Vil mapped out a dungeon, which he had no information on. To calm her down, Vil explains how he did it, which was by using the vibration that ran through the ground when he was mining to map the terrain of the dungeon, similar to that of a bat using echolocation. Crowley wonders if he was a god due to his godlike abilities. Vil explains to her that he is just a blacksmith who's very good at making things. After finishing up, he returns to the castle and greets Poro and Crowley. And before he knew it, he was charged by Poro, who embraced him with tears in her eyes as she was worried sick. It had been 10 days since he left the castle, as time flowed differently between the two spaces. To compensate for lost time, Vil reaches into his pocket and places a crescent clip with a star in the middle and places it on her hair. It was not for show. The clip was an attachment device capable of telepathically speaking with Poro. With this, Vil and Poro could communicate no matter where they were. This was similar to when he borrowed the existential evolution idea from Poro, as he used Crowley's telepathy technique to create the device using the indestructible ores collected from the walls of the dungeon. We return to the village, as Vil and Poro descend upon the villagers with the white dragon. They immediately began to run away from her, which saddened Crowley as she saw that her appearance was not wanted here. Vil calls back the villagers and explains to them that the dragon they feared was also a victim of the curse they suffered under, and she was here to apologize. Instead of verbally, Vil took a different approach by offering something instead. By using the white dragon scales, he created a fountain in the white dragon image that sprayed water with the ability to heal any illness. It took effect immediately as the villagers could feel their strength returning. This was the dragon's way of apologizing, and they all began to kneel and thank the almighty dragon god. Lady Crowley smiles, thanking Vil for his help in earning back the villagers' trust. A messenger owl suddenly landed on the shoulders of Vil. He opened the message and saw that it was a message for him to return to the imperial capital as the hero Caroline was badly injured fighting an unknown monster. Let's go to the moment before Lady Caroline's injuries. A giant squid monster appeared in the city of Carter and blocked Caroline's path to see Vil. But the monster was too formidable, causing her to use one of her most potent attacks. By flying in the sky, Caroline rotates her arm in a circular motion, creating two circular ice mirrors, one black and the other white. They turned spherical, creating two moons that came crashing down on the squid. They both landed on their target, sending bits of the squid flying. But that wasn't nearly enough, as the squid attacks back, sending Caroline flying away. Seeing her master cough up blood, Corey says her farewell and activates Absolute Zero, taking its own life to save its own master. Caroline woke up in a hospital screaming Corey's name. Vil gently rested his hands on her head and calmed her down. Thanks to Lady Crowley, Vil and Poro were able to arrive at the Empire on time. Caroline was in a state of shock, having seen Corey's sacrifice, as she was like a family member to her. Vil wasn't sure he could relieve her pain, as he feared the unimaginable as fixing a destroyed holy sword was impossible, which was why the Hapusai maintenance was so important. Caroline held Corey's core in her hands with remorseful eyes as she regretted that she couldn't properly say her goodbyes. Vil was frightened to see the core intact. The core is the power source of a holy sword, a power embedded in the hilt that serves as the heart of a holy sword. After seeing the core, Vil thinks it was possible to save Corey, but if a mistake is made, it would be like taking Corey's life with his own hands. Even after hearing this, Caroline still gave Vil the core, placing all her trust in his skill. This is a very hard task for him to do, as not even his grandfather, who could only do basic repairs on a holy sword, could do what he was about to attempt. Though doubtful in his skills, Vil still tried, and by using each of the 5 skills he possesses, combined into one, created a new skill called relic reforming. Outside, we see Lakia standing before the giant squid that was frozen in place. A cracking noise was heard, and before she knew it, one of the tentacles broke free from the ice. But Lakia was prepared, and with her troops, she rained a bombardment of bullets upon the tentacle. The bullets were ineffective, and the troops stood no chance against the tentacle. Something was wrong with the squid, as its strength kept growing at an alarming rate. Lakia tries her best to reduce casualties by joining the fight, attacking the tentacle with one of her attacks. She celebrated as everything was working perfectly, but she was greatly mistaken. The squid absorbs a soldier's life force, greatly amplifying its powers to greater lengths and emerging from the shattered ice. Knowing the catastrophe that would happen if the squid entered the Empire, Lakia made the difficult decision to use her sword art, the technique of the Holy Sword, which if used, would shorten her lifespan. Before using the technique, she apologizes to her spirit Kaminari, as the ride was going to be a rough one for her. It didn't mind, as this was a part of its choice when becoming her holy sword. Lakia used her new eye to stun the squid for a brief moment, and took to the skies, releasing her sword's signature move. Electricity began to surround her, and so did her vines. It was ready. Her ultimate attack was fully charged, and she screamed the name of her attack, Sword Art, Storm Serpent, and dived into the squid and vaporized its body to ashes. She could now be at ease with the defeat of the squid. The ground tremors with a rustle, and what emerged beneath it was none other than the squid, completely unscathed. There was nothing Lakia could do since her holy sword had died, and she was out of strength to fight back. The sound of a hammer ripples through her ears, a sound she knew too well, and as if transported to the past, she opens her eyes to see her injuries healed and her holy sword in hand. Only one man had such a capability to create such miracles, and that man was Vil, the blacksmith, the one who brought back both holy swords with his ability. It was now Vil's turn to face off against the squid, as it did something he could not overlook, which was destroying 2 precious swords and hurting his friends. The squid attacks Vil with one of its tentacles, but Lakia intervenes, slicing the tentacle in 2. This time, it was different. The squid was unable to regenerate its tentacles. This was all thanks to Vil, who had upgraded Lakia's holy sword. Its regeneration was no longer an issue, as it was no longer a tedious and repetitive battle. Although there was a chance of victory, the squid still had its life-draining ability. It suddenly changes forms from a squid to a giant feline with a demon mask, a form that is known as the Divine Lion. It attacks more aggressively and chaotically, attacking from every open angle. This was a battle the maidens could not win, and so Vil stepped up and used his ability Almighty Refinement on himself to enhance his body. The Divine Lion swung its paws, but the only thing it attacked was the ground it stood on. It was as if it were attacking an imaginary foe, for as each time it struck, Vil was nowhere to be seen. Thanks to his refinement ability, which was not only tied to objects, Vil was effectively superhuman when used on himself. Lady Crowley recognized a familiar pattern in the Divine Lion, as it exhibited the same rash and uncontrollable rage it once had, making her realize that the lion was cursed. The source of its condition was evident on its forehead. The lion dives at Vil, ready to end the battle, but Vil took the chance to enlarge his hammer and dispelled the curse cast upon it. After the dust cleared, the Divine Lion appeared colorful and with a bright smile on its face, and it spoke in a feminine tone. After coming to her senses, the lioness thanked Vil for saving her and Vil pats her on the nose and tells her not to mention it. And she runs off while promising that fate will bring them together again. And of course, Lakia became jealous of what she thought was a new contender for Vil's love. Suddenly, tree roots began to appear from the ground, the mastermind behind the attack on Caroline, and the one who was responsible for everything that transpired here appeared. Like a coward, it hid beneath the ground and spied on the battle, as its cursed victims fought in its stead. It was curious to know how Vil was so familiar with his cursed ability. In a few words, Vil explains that the complexity of his curse was so garbage that it wasn't much of a challenge to dispel. Vil did not like the way it toyed with people's actions, and he promised to fix its cursed structure. It laughs after hearing Vil remark about fixing its body. Such a remark was weightless, as it shouts explaining that it was created by the 7 powers, a cursed object, and it shouts its name, introducing itself as Tsukumagami. A path was created for it the moment it was born, a path he needed to walk which would lead to the destruction of every sacred relic in the world. Vil knew what needed to be done after hearing his remark. Tsukumagami attacks, sending its cursed tendrils at Vil. Vil activates his almighty refinement steel spear forest, and spears appear from the ground and pierce the tendril, but they fade through. Its attack landed, causing a massive explosion. Tsukumagami explains that Vil's demise was expected as he believed Vil had no way of hurting its godly body with man-made objects. Only objects touched by the divine could harm it. What Tsukumagami did not know was that it just gave away the formula to defeat it. Vil tossed his hammer Mjolnir, but that was a decoy as a giant sword appeared and penetrated his arm. The sword was created by Vil using his spatial box. The sword withered away as that one in particular was fake. Vil summoned countless spatial boxes. This was the 5th ability Vil hated using. His 5th ability allows his spatial box to store and retain a holy sword's memories even when removed. As long as Vil had mana, he could duplicate every holy sword stored in his box for any amount of time he wanted by creating a fake duplicate. He sent a barrage of fake holy swords at Tsukumagami. Gungnir, Aegis, Excalibur, and more came crashing down on him. He jumps into the sky and dodges the swords. Roots appeared under the ground ready to attack, but Vil was prepared, and swords appeared from beneath the ground and pinned down its tendrils. This time Tsukumagami had no way of dodging Vil's attack. It tried to apologize, but Vil wasn't interested in an apology, and it was eradicated by the swords that he was destined to destroy. After the battle, Vil was bedridden due to exhausting his mana. The girls began to quarrel, as they could not decide who should be the one to feed him. Vil was fully recovered and did not need any help being fed. To settle their scuffle, he advised that they share instead. But the girls were not going for it. They indeed settled their differences, but only temporarily, so that they could all feed Vil instead. Lady Artemis arrived at the hospital after hearing about Vil's condition. She was worried about his injuries, hoping he received proper care, since he was a treasure of the Empire. Caroline was confused about her statement. She didn't recall Vil being a part of her empire. What she could recall was that Vil was a citizen of the empire, rather than being a part of it. Vil explains to Caroline that Artemis had personally bestowed him with a noble title. Caroline became sad as she felt Vil was drifting away from her. Seeing her expression, Vil assured her that he would always take care of her regardless of status. Her face became red, and she ran out of the room to cool off. She misunderstood Vil as he was talking about maintaining her sword and not whatever she was thinking. Artemis wanted to reward Vil once more for saving the Empire again, a revered hero, she notes, who needed to be rewarded. Vil felt calling him a hero was excessive. Vil did not realize the great deed he had done for the Empire. As if he hadn't arrived, the Empire would be in ruins, due to Tsukumagami being a foe too powerful to contest. To show their sincerest gratitude, Lakia and Artemis thanked Vil for his help. Vil smiled softly. He didn't do anything special. He explains the only reason he was able to win was due to his ability being a counter to Tsukumagami. In his eyes, he was not the special one. Instead, he believed the holy relics were the ones who should be getting the praise, as they were the ones who did most of the work. They all smiled at Vil's unusualness. We return to Vil's homeland where we see Sirikul being tossed violently. She began to beg the person before her to join the Hassan Company. The owner of the store shares a newspaper showing the downfall of the Hassan Trading Company and their nasty schemes of selling fake weapons. Before closing the doors, she had one final message to Cyril. The woman tells Cyril that the fall of her business was deserved as it was built on lies which deserved to rot. Cyril stood there sulking in her failure, which she brought upon herself. With no other choice, she knew what must be done to save her dying business. We shift to Sechin walking the streets with a bag filled with weapons. He looked as if he had aged 20 years since the first time we had seen him. He throws his bag on the floor and shouts to all the passers-by to come and look at his items that were worth dying for. The bag was opened, revealing legendary items like Excalibur and Aegis, and other powerful legendary swords, all for the small price of 1,000 gold. To test the certitude of these swords, an adventurer took Excalibur and sliced a crystallized structure created by a novice mage. The sword was actually able to cut the structure, which gave fuel to Sechin's delusion. People began to swarm the bag of weapons after seeing what one of his swords could do. Sadly, they were fooled. Though the sword was able to slice through the crystallized structure, it was badly damaged for a so-called legendary weapon. They began to realize that each of the weapons was fake. And to further validate their discovery, the adventurer who wielded Excalibur explains that he could not feel the immense power from Sechin's legendary weapon, as it was a known fact that legendary items exude immense power just by holding them. It was too much for Sechin to handle. To him, they were the crazy ones. In his mind, his skills were so revered that even the gods became envious of his skills. The adventurers were shocked after hearing that he was the blacksmith of the failing Hassan company. They became more enraged as they saw what was written in the newspaper about them. The cursed object shines more as it feeds on Sechin's negative emotions. Cyril appeared and shouted at her husband. She held a newspaper, but not the one that was carrying the news of their downfall, but the news of Vil's heroic deeds, which proved they were wrong about Vil and needed to apologize. Sechin kicks his wife in her stomach, the stomach that was carrying their child. He was enraged after hearing her speak of Vil, so enraged that he would rather die than apologize to his brother. Like a madman, he grabs his wife and asks what more she needed, as he believed he was enough to bring her salvation. Cyril slaps him and repeated the words of his father and grandfather, that he was talentless. This struck something inside him, and Cyril walks away. She was going to apologize to Vil by herself, as she could admit to her wrongs, unlike him, who was trying to prove a point rather than trying to save their business. At this moment, the curse began to attack and corrupt Sechin's right arm, which became swollen, resembling a demonic arm. If talent was what his father, grandfather, and Cyril wanted, there was only one thing he could do, and that was to take Vil's talent away from him. Cyril was on a train heading to the imperial capital. During the ride, she remained composed, seated beside a man with his face covered and a woman, and her innocent daughter, who was playing with her doll. The doll suddenly snapped, and there was no way her mother could find the tools needed to repair it. The mysterious man across them stretched out his hand, revealing a circular mark resembling the golden hands. With mysterious magic, he was able to fix the child's doll. The child starts to inquire about the details of his profession due to his strange ability, but she didn't receive a definitive answer, yet still, they both thanked the man. The man suddenly turned to Cyril and began to speak, saying that he couldn't ignore a person down on their luck. Cyril replies, asking the man if he was a famous blacksmith due to the mark on his hand resembling the golden hands. Out of nowhere, and without any information on this random person, Cyril begs the man to join her company. His eyes turned in her direction as he began to speak. He tells Cyril that he heard the Hassan company was in a bad situation due to their bad approach. Cyril became shocked. She did not once mention the name of her company to the man. The man explains he had no interest in joining an organization, as he was on a journey to create something. His remark reminded her of Vil and his dream. Cyril explains her eagerness to the man as the reason why she was so rash was due to her lack of options, and having to prepare for the baby that would be entering this world soon. The man was delighted to hear her story, but what piqued his interest was her baby, as he found them to be the most fascinating thing humans could create. He then hands Cyril something. It was a piece of candy. He tells her to eat it, and after she would feel even better than she is now. Cyril opens the wrap and places the candy in her mouth, and a happy sensation rushes through her body. Cyril remains unresponsive, as if trapped in a worry-free world where only happiness exists. The man stood up, prepared to leave the train even though it wouldn't stop until reaching the capital. He already knew that. Before leaving, he reminded the child to take good care of the doll, and he walked away. The mother found him to be a very nice man, which was her last sentence before the train was mysteriously shifted off the rails and swung them and circle across with it. The train continued to go off the rails at high speed, and everyone inside the train was at risk of dying. The train stopped as it ran out of momentum to keep going. Outside, bodies lie lifeless, and the man who was inside smirks happily with the outcome of this incident, as this was his intention, an incident he made happen as he could create tragedies. Vil arrived at the scene and saw the catastrophe that had been caused. Without wasting any time, Vil activates his golden hands and identifies every living being in the vicinity with their injuries. With a swing of his hammer, he activates full restoration and restores the train, and heals everyone who was injured in the crash. Poro hugs him after witnessing his ability yet again. He realized his skills had improved, and as always, he needed no reward for his deeds. A voice suddenly called out to him, and he looked down from above and saw his ex-wife Cyril. She kneeled on the ground and began apologizing to Vil for her mistake. Vil approached her. He wanted her to go to Imperial Capital Hospital, as there was no time for an apology, as she had just been in an accident with a baby inside her. She began to apologize yet again, but each time she spoke she exhausted her body and fainted on the ground. He carried her to the dragon and placed her unconscious body on the dragon's back, and watched her fly away to the hospital. Vil began to inspect the train, and he saw nothing that could cause an accident of this magnitude. He enters the inside and sees a black haze. He was the only one who could see it, as Poro eyes could not. He continued and followed the haze which led outside the train. Vil felt it instantly. The situation that they were in was dire, as the child was carrying a cursed item. And so he ran outside, fearing the possibilities of that cursed doll. With his teleportation crystal, Vil arrived at the hospital. While tracing the cursed haze, Cyril spots him. Vil arrives at a door where the haze is prominent. He enters the room and sees a small child looking sad and surrounded by the thick haze. The child was sad because her mother suddenly stopped moving. Vil sees the doll that was carrying the malicious curse. The doll's eyes were widened. Its hair was rugged, and its neck looked as if it was about to fall off any minute. Vil approaches the child and asks to see her doll, but she refuses. He explains that he was a doctor who fixed dolls, and she finally gave in. She hands Vil her doll. He taps the hammer on the doll's forehead where the cursed circle was located and reconstructs the doll. The doll appears more angelic and loses its cursed aura. The child's mother woke up from her coma-induced state, and she immediately hugged her mother. Vil gave the child back its doll and explained that her new doll has become a super doll that brings blessings to everyone around it. She gladly accepts her new doll. While doing so, Vil asks her if anyone had tampered with her doll before. The mother explained that a man with his face covered had fixed the doll while they were on the train. Vil would make sure to remember that description well. He thanks the mother and child, but the mother explains that she was the one who should be thanking him for fixing her daughter's doll, as it was due to that reason she was able to become better. The doll began to speak and approached its master to thank him for creating her. Cyril watched surprised as she witnessed the unimaginable. Noise began to erupt inside the hospital as patients began to feel better out of nowhere. It was a miracle so great it could only be described as a god descending upon them, as patients who had months to live suddenly woke up with energy and were ready to be discharged. Only a few knew who was behind this, and Cyril was one of them. But knowing this had made her selfish, as she desired Vil all for herself. She decided to enter the room, telling Vil that she had been looking for him. Vil brushes her off as he has no interest in whatever she is going to say. She spoke regardless and apologized for kicking him out of the company. She explains that because of this, the Hassan company's numbers had tanked drastically. She continues, telling Vil that she couldn't watch the company they both worked so hard to build fall apart. Her words had exposed her true intention as she audaciously told Vil that with his return, their customer would return as well, which makes you wonder if she was truly sorry for kicking Vil out of the party or sorry due to her current predicament. Vil did not even look at her. He only said no. The tears from her eyes vanished. To her, it was weird to see the man she had cheated on, still angry at her. Sirikul had no shame as she spoke, asking Vil if the reason he was angry was due to her cheating on him and betraying his love. Poro had had enough of her rant and began to open her eyes to the reason Vil would not return, as she had betrayed him. All Sirikul cared about was her father's company. She thought Poro was from another company as she refused to give up Vil to someone from a shady company. She shouted. Poro explains to her that she was not from a company, but someone who was saved by the man she tossed away, a man she knows better than anyone else, even her. Poro laid out her punishment brutally and explained that her current state was caused by herself and not Vil, as she was the one who cut ties with him. She started to do the only thing she could, and that was to beg Vil to return. It was too late. Vil had no interest in the Hassan company. Vil reminds her of what she said before she kicked him out of the company, which was that she was the one who made the Hassan company what it was, and that he had nothing to do with it. And he believed any issue that she was facing in the company should be solved by the person who had made it what it was. His final words were that he had nothing to do with the Hassan trading company anymore. Sirikul realized what she had done, and she began to blame herself for it. She apologized to Sechin and their child for her stupidity. She began to shake, and her clothes were ripped to shreds as her belly grew out of proportion. She cried out in pain, and the cursed haze appeared once again. Vil shouted, asking her if she had encountered a man with his face covered in clothes on her way here. She couldn't properly form a sentence due to the immense pain, but she was able to utter bits of words from her sentence which gave Vil a rough idea of what had transpired on the train. A baby appeared from the cursed magic circle in the air and charged at Poro and Vil. The baby attacks Poro and Vil, and they dodge and evacuate the mother and daughter out of the room. Sirikul stares at her baby with disgust. The innocent child approaches his mother, but Sirikul was too scared of his appearance and slapped his hands away, calling him a monster. The child cries, which sends a supersonic wave across the room. Sirikul realizes that the appearance of her child was caused by the candy she ate. Vil looks at Sirikul and tells her that her child was an innocent victim and doesn't deserve such treatment, as she was the only mother he has. The child cries for his mother. Sirikul approached the child and rested her head on him and apologized for what she had said to him. The child's sadness was quelled. Suddenly, adventurers came inside the room and sent a barrage of magical elements towards the child. She stepped in the path of the attack and sacrificed herself to protect her child. The child began to cry with rage in his eyes and screams so loud and shatters the ground and breaks the walls of the hospital. Vil quickly restored everything back to normal with his golden hands. He then turned towards the adventurers with anger and shouted at them for what they did to an innocent child. They apologized and ran out of the room. Sirikul woke up, the pain was gone, and her life was saved by the man she had betrayed. Her baby approaches her this time in human form, and they both embrace each other. She thanks Vil for protecting her child, though replies telling her that it wasn't for her sake, and walks away. She shed one final tear and apologized for the last time. What was next for Sirikul was to return to Sechin with her newborn. As for Sechin, he was currently in jail. The man who gave him the cursed tool mocks him, calling him pathetic. Sechin shouts, demanding that he give him stronger items. The man approaches and touches Sechin's demonic arm. A couple of minutes later, an explosion erupts at the jail center, and we see Sechin with a more disfigured and grotesque demonic arm. With his new ability, Sechin goes around causing chaos and taking away civilians' arms. The adventurers he tried to scam came to stop his rampage, but they were tossed away with their arm being ripped off. Their arm was not only taken, but also their skill, adding an even more grotesque look to Sechin's arm. Sechin was suddenly sliced by a woman. It was the guild master who came to save everyone. She suddenly felt a sharp pain in her right arm, and she realized her arm was missing. Sechin's sanity was on the verge of no return as he prepared to kill the S-rank guild master.